Retro Quickies. Three ninjas kick back.
The Three Ninjas movie franchise, an absolute staple of movie rental nights when I was a child. Usually the first and fourth movie, because for some reason that's all my local grocery store had for rent at any point in time, so I never saw the second or third movie. Thankfully, that's what license games are for, to fill the gaps in our knowledge. That is totally what they're there for. Yep. Three Ninjas Kick Back, developed by Malibu Interactive, is based on the second movie in the series and is the only game adaptation of any of the films, released on both the Genesis and Super Nintendo. We're looking at the Genesis version right now, and I haven't tried the SNES version, so I can't comment on any differences between them at this time. Right off the bat, though, the presentation of this game is all over the place. The opening credits scroll and all of the story scenes are made in total silence, using actually quite good pixelated representations of the movie stills, and gives a very quick summation of each scene in the movie without really giving us any sort of transition or context for them. I mean, if you've seen the movie, you probably have a good idea of what's going on, as they do seem to lift a lot of the dialogue straight from it, but we can shift from the villains having a conversation to Grandpa telling us about his plans. The plus is that these movies never really had a lot of nuance to their plot, so the scenes do give you enough information to kind of piece things together, but if you're going into this expecting it to be a replacement for not seeing the movie, for whatever reason, this definitely isn't going to help you on that front. And from the realistic portrayals of the pixelated portraits, we jump into a much more cartoonish and vibrant environment in the levels themselves. At this point, I suppose I should point out that you can choose between the three brothers depending on who you want to play as, but the choice seems to ultimately be aesthetic in nature, as despite each brother wielding a different weapon, all three of them have the same moves, and there isn't really a huge difference in power or reach. The only big difference is if you choose Tum Tum, who, being the youngest brother, is about half as tall as the others. But given that it doesn't really affect much other than his overhead spin attack, this is honestly a minor thing, at least from what I saw while playing. And when it comes to playing the game, I'm kind of split, actually. There's a lot of good stuff in the movement. Movement speed for the size of the sprites is pretty decent, and you have a high and far jump. Your attack is snappy and has decent range. You have an above-head spin attack that can even deflect incoming shuriken. We have the makings of a decent platformer here, at least in terms of what you can do with your movement. You can even grab onto ledges and ropes, climb along them while still attacking, and you can drop off of them or launch yourself up into the air easily from where you're hanging. It actually feels pretty good, especially when you're jumping around and doing some basic platforming. But that's not what you're doing most of the time. Where the game really falters is in the level design and its enemies. Enemies tend to pop out of nowhere, quite literally in the case of these crouching ninjas. And while most of them will stay defeated when you hit them enough, ninjas respawn endlessly at certain times, and the ones that throw shuriken are the worst because they always throw a huge fanning arc of the things that can be deflected if you happen to be under it, but from any other position, odds are good that you will get hit by it. And they really like using these guys in wide open levels where you can't really easily reach them before they throw. You do have about 6 hits and enough after-hit invincibility to not get entirely overwhelmed by multiple enemies, but the time is low enough that the same enemy can very quickly drain your health if they have a hitbox on their body or on their attacks, if it doesn't vanish when it hits the player or an obstacle. There are also plenty of cheap tricks used by a lot of games of this time, traps that you can't see before they activate and hit you, enemies that can attack from off-screen, and no real tools to deal with most incoming attacks. Holding up on the D-pad even looks like you should be able to take some sort of defensive stance, but it doesn't do anything other than give a visual indicator that you can use the spin move above your head, which is not only great for defense, but also has a surprisingly great reach as well. In most of the levels, this honestly isn't a huge problem if you take your time, but as the levels get longer and more labyrinthine, and the enemies start showing more variety, to the point of introducing enemies that you really have no choice but to hope you have enough health to outlast in a war of attrition, I'm talking about these out-of-nowhere dragon heads, the tougher it gets to stay alive. I will give the game credit, it does have a lot of different types of levels without doing the really annoying thing of shifting to an entirely different gameplay style or mechanic. Instead, all of the levels are ostensibly either mazes or semi-open areas. Most of the time your goal is just to get to the end, but there are also plenty of levels where you have to perform a secondary task as well, usually finding or destroying a number of objects before the exit to the level will open up to you. In these, you'll sometimes be pursued by invincible enemies that can be stunned, either by attacking them enough or using elements in the level to your advantage, mimicking the goofier Home Alone style chases in the movies. There are also a number of boss fights throughout, but many of them are very simple. The first through, you can just straight up power through with a full health bar, and one of the later bosses won't even attack you if you keep jump kicking him in the face. And again, the level design near the end starts to get so labyrinthine and zigzaggy that actually getting through them without losing all your lives is an issue. The game isn't long, not really. It's split into 5 different levels, and each level is further divided into 3 to 5 short stages. Some of them have checkpoints scattered around, others don't. However, if you lose all your lives, you have one singular continue, but that continue will take you all the way back to the first stage of the level. Lose all your lives again, and it's game over. The game does have a very simple password system that can take you back to the first stage of the level you were on before, which is nice, but especially for the last couple of levels, where you have to deal with out-of-nowhere ice physics combined with buzzsaws that cause 2 ticks of damage rather than 1, it's not really that big of a help. So yeah, I'm kind of conflicted because there are some good ideas in this game. It has a decent cartoonish art style, and while the music in the stages is the typical Genesis sound font affair that doesn't really stand out on its own, it does have enough energy to keep you going. But all that doesn't carry over to the completely silent, pixelated movie stills that barely convey what's actually happening in the story. The platforming gameplay and the movement options you have actually make it feel pretty good to play, but you barely do any real platforming compared to the clunky and frustrating combat in levels that become rat mazes full of traps and annoying enemies by the time you hit level 4. In spite of its jank, I don't want to totally write this one off. Its status as a licensed game isn't doing it any favors, but there are some good ideas here. I just feel like the focus wasn't placed where it could have done the most good. If more of the levels had been focused around traversing platforms rather than navigating mazes and dealing with enemies and traps, I think I could give this one a solid recommendation. But as it stands, your ability to get far into this one is going to be heavily dependent on your personal tolerance for older game jank, especially older licensed games.